Greetings ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Reddit series video from the subreddit Ch.5 called Clintstone Chapter 5 Acceptable. The swarm was standing in the door was the biggest one that I'd ever seen. He was even taller than Clint. His body was thick and coated with muscle, his tusks carved with several inches from his jaw, brilliant white and sharp. Several pale scars crisscrossed his face, one of them deep and dark and red, passing by the right side of his mouth, tugging at it like a permanent half-smile. He was dressed in a blue uniform tailored to his massive frame. The blue meant that he was a member of the rebellion. Clint did not seem to care. He stepped forward. His face was a thunderhead. Jem intercepted him before he could move more than a step. He put his hand on Clint's chest and said, "Clint, wait. He's with us." Clint looked down at Jem. In his eyes, I could see his reason fighting his anger. He stood there, tense and ready to pounce for a long moment. His body relaxed and he stepped back. "All right, but I expect an explanation." "Since when do beings need an explanation to obey orders?" barked the swarm. "I am a superior officer, and I expect those under my chain of command to do not strike me without leave." I could see Clint stiffen at that, but he did not act on his hatred. I was grateful for that. It did not go well if he attacked a member of the rebellion on our first day here. The swarm's uniform wore a number of insignia that meant that he was a sergeant major. A rather high rank to be testing recruits, I thought, but I did not question further. "Are you going to stand there all day, or are you going to get in here?" The swarm thundered. He backed into the large room, and we followed. The room was circular, with a wide patch of dirt in the middle of the floor. Standing around it were 9 other beings, each looking more dangerous than the last. They were all dressed in the blue uniforms of the rebellion, and I assumed that they were recruits just like us. The swarm strode into the center of the dirt ring, every step a testament to the great strength that he possessed, muscle rippling and jumping under the uniform. "Quit looking like slack-jawed and join the circle," bellowed the swarm. He seemed like a being who only spoke in one volume, and that was deafening. Clint and I complied, stepping in between a harass and a gurk. Both looked as though they were ready to fight. I guessed it would take me about 30 seconds to take them down. "My name is Quantem Wensday, and I will be your combat test today," shouted the swarm. "Some of you may have noticed that I look a great deal like the beings we are here to fight. It's almost like we're the same species, but the Swarm Empire and the Swarm Race are not the same thing. I am Swarm and I hate the Empire. It is a physical incarnation of everything wrong with the universe, and it must be brought down. I know that better than all of you. I wager that I hate the Empire more than the rest of you put together." Clint's face twitched at that, but he did nothing. Quatement continued his monologue, seemingly without a breath. "The Empire is a bunch of mean, brutal bastards who enjoy slavery and oppressing the weak. I dislike slavery, and I only oppress those who deserve it." His face said that the 11 of us seemed to fit the last category. "This is all you need to know about me. I will fight the Empire to my last breath, and I'm here to make sure that you can do the same." He paused for breath, his eyes glaring out at the 11 beings circling around him. "I am told that you 11 are the best we have taken in this week. I very much doubt that. You look like a stiff breeze could knock you over, and I am here to find out which ones of you can stand. This is what's going to happen. One by one, each of you will face me in single combat, unarmed except for the weapons nature gave you. Should I judge you acceptable, you will be cleared from the field for work. And you will be cleared. You will go to basic training with the rest of the freshies." He spat in the dirt, expressing his feelings on the subject. "Who's first?" he asked, a hard glint in his eye. He glanced down the line, eyeing each of us in turn. Several beings looked away from his gaze. Some looked back, then away. Only 3 met his eye. Clint glared back at Quatement with fire in his eyes. A Canton with the posture of a military man gazed back with a calm expression, his slit pupils unwavering. When it came to my turn, I stared back, my eyes boring back into the swarms with as much intensity as they bored into mine. "You!" he boomed, pointing at one of the beings who glanced away. He was a tall Gwen reaching around my shoulder. Now I noticed that was strange. Before Bohones had pointed it out. I would never have noticed. The Guan looked like he had been in a few fights, with several heel cracks on his hard skin. He stepped out into the dirt ring and took a position without comment. Croort faced him, arms at his side. He towered over a foot higher than the Guan and looked like he outweighed him by 100 pounds. Begin. The Guan leapt forward, arms lashing out with great speed. Croort jumped to the side with an even greater speed, and the Guan barreled past him. Croort lifted up his foot and struck the Guan on the lower legs as he rushed by. The Guan crashed into the ground with an audible thud, and Croort placed a foot on his back, forcing him into the dirt. Unacceptable. The next recruit entered the ring. He was dispatched in a similarly swift fashion. Unacceptable. 3 more beings entered the ring, and all were defeated quickly. I watched Croort and was very impressed with his skills. Unacceptable. Granted, I hadn't seen much. The fights only lasted a handful of seconds, but what I did see told me that Croort was as good as Clint, maybe better. He moved with speed, precision, and used his size to his advantage. Unacceptable. But he did not rely on it. He used his speed and his agility to defeat his opponents, never using more strength than he needed to. Unacceptable. You must be the human that everyone is talking about. The last being lay groaning on the dirt, and Croort was looking up at Clint. They say that you took an entire garrison single-handedly. You must think that you're pretty good, huh? Clint stared at the swarm with a sturdy silence. His body looked relaxed, but I could see the telltale signs that Clint was ready to move at a moment's notice. That may be, but I doubt that you've ever faced a member of the Home Guard. Let's see what you've got. I blinked. Croort had been a member of the Home Guard. That was an elite unit that guarded the Emperor himself. The Legion of the Guard defended the Swarm itself, and they were the best the Swarm army had to offer. They could take up platoons almost by themselves. The Home Guard were the best of the best. They were augmented by twisted science that left them with a giant size and trained day and night for years, until they were the deadliest warriors in the galaxy. Them and the Breakers, the other elite Swarm Legion. Gladly, Clint said, and as he stepped out onto the dirt, Croort and Clint stood facing each other, separated by a few feet. They circled each other, sizing each other up. Clint had the advantage here, as he had seen Croort fight before. The Swarm would be fighting blind as it was, other than the stories of Clint's skill. Croort seemed to be a practical being. He would take those stories with a great deal of salt. The similarity in the physicality was striking. Both were extremely tall, each over 6 feet, but for once Clint was the smaller one. Croort stood an inch or two taller than Clint. His eyes were level with Clint's forehead. Both of them were solidly built, muscles bulging in places where there shouldn't have been muscle, and arms thicker than most beings' legs. But Clint was the smaller one here as well. I did not think that it would be possible for a being to be bigger than Clint Stone, other than an Erg, but Croort was. Still circling each other, their limbs moved with a smooth precision. Not a step out of place, they watched each other, looking for an opening. Clint saw one and swung his right hand in a quick jab at Croort's side. He blocked it with a swift motion of his arm. Clint raised his eyebrow and swung the other side with his metal arm. I noticed that he did not swing it with near the strength that he could have. If he wanted to, Clint would have completely obliterated the bones in Croort's chest with a single punch. But he did not. He swung with the same strength as his flesh and blood arm, while still devastating, would not cause a great deal of damage. If what I saw of Croort was correct, he would not do much more than bruise. Croort blocked Clint's swing. Clint grinned as he unleashed a series of strikes, each coming faster than the last. Any one of them would have overwhelmed a lesser foe and driven them to their knees. Croort blocked them all or avoided them. Clint's face broke into a wide smile. This is going to be fun. With that, Clint attacked in earnest. He moved in a flurry of motion, his arms a blur. Croort stood firm against the attacks, a cliff against the storming ocean. He defended for several moments, getting a feel for Clint's skill. Then he attacked. First jabbing, knees striking, elbows swinging, Croort moved in perfect steps, in an onslaught that left the other beings around the circle shocked with awe. Clint weaved between the blows and set some back. The fight was unlike anything that I'd ever seen before. each combatant ducking and weaving and struck, mirroring each other. Punches passed by, close enough that the other was able to feel the breeze. Some connected, but they were shrugged off and counter-blow delivered. Bodies twisted, angled for better advantage for dodging the blow. It was not a fight, it was a dance, and both of the dancers were masters. As I watched, I realized that I'd never truly seen Clint Stone fight. He had fought hundreds of thugs, pirates, mercenaries, and soldiers, but he had never faced a challenge in them. They fell like trees before an axe. He danced amongst them as a demigod, untouchable. Now he danced with one as skilled as he. Crawled moved with careful, graceful movements, matching and countering every one of Clint's. The speed and agility displayed by the fighters was the most magnificent thing that I had ever seen. Either one of them could have taken on an army and come out the victor. Titans of the battlefield faced each other, trading blows with skill rarely seen in the universe. They fought for a long while, each seeking out one mistake that would prove their opponent's undoing. In watching them, it became apparent that the way that they fought was very different from the other. Crawled fought with a rigid, structured style. Each movement flowed smoothly into the next, each a clear, distinct movement. Clint seemed to fight with a wild, undisciplined style full of chaos and sudden jerks, but it had a beauty to it, a beauty of a wild beast, a savage predator who fights with the instincts given by nature. There was an order to Clint's fighting, a layer underneath it all. He directed the flow from the wild punches to controlled jabs, the savage blows to swift strikes. Order met chaos in the center of the dirt ring, and chaos won. Croort made a tiny, almost imperceivable mistake. His heel turned an inch too far to one of his ropes, and he threw off his rhythm for just the tiniest bit. If he had been facing any other opponent, he would have recovered in a heartbeat and continued fighting. But he was facing Clint Stone. Slight mistake was enough for Clint to slip around Croort's defenses and land a decisive blow on his torso. Croort was forced sideways, and Clint finished him off by sweeping a blow to his legs, followed by a strike to his forearm. Croort crashed to the ground, and Clint stood over him, red-faced and body tensed. But his face was not red with anger, but exhaustion, and his body relaxed as soon as the fight was over. The rest of the recruits stared in awe at what they had just witnessed. Several had their jaws hanging open, and I could not blame them. I felt close to the same. Clint laughed breathlessly and offered the hand to Croort. The Swim clasped it as he and Clint pulled him up. Clint clapped his hand on the Swim's shoulder. "That was the best fight I've had in years. Thank you." And he smiled. I did not know what was going on, and Clint was happy that the Swim major, one of the race that he hated. Croort nodded. "You really are as good as they say. Acceptable." Clint nodded and stepped back out of the circle. Croort straightened in the center of the circle and turned to me. "I wonder if the tales about you, the Jahan who fights, are true as well. You're next." I walked out into the center of the ring, my mind racing. How was I to beat him? He was far more skilled than me, bigger and faster. He had stayed with Clint with a great while I had never done that. But Croort was tired. He had just spent a good 10 minutes fighting one of the most skilled beings in the universe. This was where I would have to focus my attack. I would have to drag this out, get him tired enough to be able to beat him. Until now, I had always been the other being who had attacked Croort. But if I wanted to win, I would have to wait for him to attack me. I moved to my left, and he moved to his right. We circled around the center of the ring. Beginning of this fight was indistinguishable from the one before it. I raised my hands, palms up, and curled my fingers towards me, inviting Croort to attack. He obliged. He moved in quickly, fists held high. When he got close enough, he swung out his right, connecting with my jaw. Or he tried to. I danced out of the way, twisting around behind him, striking with my elbow as I passed. I was rewarded with a grunt. Before I could do anything else, Croort spun with his lightning speed and readied himself for anything that I could throw at him. I didn't. I just danced further away. He chased me, clearly wanting to get this fight over with. I darted out of the way, moving fast. If he had been fresh, he would have caught me for sure. But he wasn't, and I was just fast enough to get out of the way. When I ducked under his next swings, I could see a knee coming up to my face. He had figured out my plan and was trying to end this fight. I twisted, and his knee had just brushed against my cheek instead of crashing into it. I hit the ground and rolled quickly to the side, trying to avoid the blows from his feet. I got my feet under me and I stood up, racing for an attack. It came from my left and I did not have time to avoid it. I threw up my arms and knocked it down across the front of my body. The force of it sent pain up my arm, but not nearly enough to stop me. I grabbed the arm at the elbow and pulled myself forward, flinging my other hand at the Croat's face. It connected. He pulled his head back as if the left arm flew in from the side and he caught me in the chin. I'd been too preoccupied with the fact that I'd managed to knock back a being nearly a foot taller than me and outweighed me by 90 pounds to notice. I flew to the side and crashed into the ground, the breath driven out of my lungs. I forced myself to my knees and then my feet. There was no way in hell that I was going to not finish this. Croat stood facing me, his hands at his sides. He saw me standing and I saw his eyes widen just a little bit. His mouth opened to say something, but I leapt at him, crashing into him with the full weight of my body, propelled forward by my legs strengthened by keeping up with Clint for 2 years. My shoulder drove into his stomach and we slammed into the ground in a heap. I ended up on top and I lifted up my fist to strike him. It was caught midair by someone standing behind me. "Dedex, stop, you're fine." It was Clint who had grabbed me. I half turned to look at him, but a strange yelping, coughing noise made me turn my head. Quart was laughing. "Certainly do fight. Better than most I've fought, too. Acceptable. Now clear off me." I did so, standing and taking my place in the circle, my mind racing and my body tired. I'd been acceptable, but I had not beaten him, and then I realized if Clint had barely beaten him, then there was no way any other beings had. It must have been how well you did against him. Clint beating him was likely never happened before. I turned my attention back to the circle. The remaining 4 beings entered the ring, and one by one each of them ended up in the dirt like I had. 3 were judged unacceptable. The 4th, the Quantem who had met his gaze, stayed up for several minutes, leaping here and there, swiping Quart as he passed. He was eventually felled, and Quart deemed him skilled enough to pass. After we had gone through and faced him, the swarm stood at the center of the rings. "Those of you who have passed shall be granted a rank of private, and you are now full member of the Rebellion Army. Those of you who did not pass will join basic training. Do not worry, I am sure you will get out much sooner than the rest." Quart seemed much more friendly and jovial than he had at the beginning of the evaluation. He must have been trying to get us all to dislike him so that we were willing to hurt him in a fight. It had worked. He continued, "Those of you who passed, you will be signed to a training mission as you will, and the test with battlefield composure. When you—" The door banged open and being rushed in, he swept his eyes around the room searching for someone. His eyes rested on Jem, seated on the edge of the room, watching the proceedings. "Jem, the Scour wants to see you now. It's urgent. He also said bring the ones who passed combat eval." Jem stood. "Those are you who passed. Follow me." He nodded the head at Quart. "With your leave, Sergeant Major." Quart waved his hand at Jem and left the room, Clint and the Canton and I on his heels. End of chapter. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider subscribing. If you wish to support the author, there is a link to the original story, so pop over there and give him your support. If you wish to support this channel, however, there are a few ways to do so. The best and easiest would be to share this video with other people, as well as liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. All of these things tell the algorithm that this channel is at least vaguely interesting, and that may share it with other people. If you wish to support the channel in some other manner, watching my other videos would also help tremendously. Or, if you really like, there is a link down below to leave a tip or to join the Patreon. Any and all support is very much appreciated. And I hope that you all have a good one until the next time, and I'll see you then. Cheers.